Continuing with Jordan Peterson's 12 rules for life. We're on rule number 7, towards the end of rule number 7. Rule number 7 is the longest chapter, and it is pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. It's all about delaying gratification. This section of rule number 7 is called Doubt Past Mere Nihilism. 300 years before Nietzsche, the great French philosopher René Descartes set out on an intellectual mission to take his doubts seriously, to break things apart, to get what was essential, to see if he could establish or discover a single proposition impervious to his skepticism. He was searching for the foundation stone on which proper being could be established. Descartes, I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. I know it looks like it's Descartes, but I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Descartes. Descartes found it, as far as he was concerned, in the I who thinks, the I who is aware, as expressed in his famous dictum. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am. But that I had been conceptualized long before. Thousands of years ago, the aware I was the all-seeing eye of Horus, the great Egyptian sun and sun god, who renewed the state by attending to and then confronting its inevitable corruption. Before that, it was the creator god Marduk of the Mesopotamians, whose eyes encircled his head and who spoke forth words of world-engineering magic. During the Christian epoch, the I transformed into the Logos, the word that speaks order into being at the beginning of time. It might be said that Descartes merely secularized the Logos, turning it more explicitly into that which is aware and thinks. That's the modern self, simply put. But what exactly is that self? We can understand to some degree its horrors if we wish to, but its goodness remains more difficult to define. The self is the great actor of evil who strode about the stage of being as Nazi and Stalinist alike, who produced Auschwitz, Buchenwald, Dachau, and the multiplicity of the Soviet gulags. And all of that must be considered with dread seriousness. But what is its opposite? What is the good that is the necessary counterpart of that evil that is made more corporeal and comprehensible by the very existence of that evil? And here we can state with conviction and clarity that even the rational intellect, that faculty so beloved of those who hold traditional wisdom in contempt, is at minimum something closely and necessarily akin to the archetypical dying and eternal resurrecting God, the eternal Savior of humanity, the Logos itself. The philosopher of science Karl Popper, certainly no mystic, regarding itself as a logical extension of the Darwinism process. A creature that cannot think must solely embody its being. It can merely act out its nature, concretely, in the here and now. If it cannot manifest its behavior what the environment demands while doing so, it will simply die. But this is not true of human beings. We can produce abstracted representations of potential modes of being. We can produce an idea in the theater of the imagination. We can test it out against other ideas, the ideas of others, or the world itself. If it falls short, we can let it go. We can, in Popper's formulation, let our ideas die in our stead. Then the essential part, the creator of those ideas, can continue onward, now untrammeled by comparison with error. Faith in the part of us that continues across those deaths is a prerequisite to thinking itself. Now, an idea is not the same as a fact. A fact is something that is dead in and of itself. It has no consciousness, no will to power, no motivation, no action. There are billions of dead facts. The internet is a graveyard of dead facts. But an idea that grips a person is alive. It wants to express itself, to live in the world. It is for this reason that the death psychologists, Freud and Jung, paramount among them, insisted that the human psyche was a battleground for ideas. An idea has an aim, it wants something, it posits a value structure. An idea believes that what it is aiming for is better than what it has now. It reduces the world to those things that aid or impede its realization and reduces everything else to irrelevance. An idea defines figure against ground. An idea is a personality, not a fact. When it manifests itself within a person, it has a strong proclivity to make of that person its avatar, to impel that person to act it out. Sometimes that impulsion, possession in another word, can be so strong that the person will die rather than allowing the idea to perish. This is, generally speaking, a bad decision, given that it is often the case that only the idea need die, and that the person with the idea can stop being its avatar, change his or her ways, and continue. To use the dramatic conceptualization of our ancestors, it is the most fundamental convictions that must die, must be sacrificed when the relationship with God had been disrupted. When the presence of undue and often intolerable suffering, for example, indicates that something has to change. This is to say nothing other than the future can be made better if the proper sacrifices take place in the present. No other animal has ever figured this out, and it took us hundreds of thousands of years to do it. It took further eons of observation and hero worship, and then millennia of study to distill that idea into a story. It then took additional vast stretches of time to access that story, to incorporate it, so that we can now simply say, here are some important words. If you are disciplined and privileged the future over the present, you can change the structure of reality in your favor. That's why I'm reading this book and recording myself reading this book, because it will greatly benefit me in the future. I've read hundreds of books. I've read hundreds of books out loud. Nobody was listening. I'm really good at reading. Okay? Where was I going with this? I don't know, but let's continue. In 1984, I started down the same road as Descartes. I did not know it was this. Oh, well, I'm doing this to benefit the future is the point that I'm making. Like, not many people are watching this right now. However, I'm aware of the quality. I'm offering a good quality service for free right now on YouTube. And I'm aware of that quality. And if you're aware of that as well, while we have this break here, hit the subscribe button and send this to one person. Put it on your Facebook, on your Twitter, or something like that. And we'll continue with rule number 7. In 1984, I started down the same road as Descartes. I did not know it was the same road at the time, and I am not claiming kinship with Descartes, who is rightly regarded as one of the greatest philosophers of our time, of all time. But I was truly plagued with doubt. I had outgrown the shallow Christianity of my youth by the time I could understand the fundamentals of Darwinian theory. After that, I could not distinguish the basic elements of Christian belief from wishful thinking. The socialism that soon afterward became so attractive to me as an alternative proved equally insubstantial. With time, I came to understand, through the great George Orwell, that much of such thinking found its motivation in hatred of the rich and successful, instead of a true regard for the poor. Besides, the socialists were more intrinsically capitalist from the capitalist. They believed just as strongly in money. They just thought it different from people who had the money. The problems plaguing humanity would vanish. This is simply untrue. There are many problems that money does not solve, and others that makes it worse. Rich people still divorce each other and alienate themselves from their children and suffer from existential angst and develop cancer and dementia and die alone and unloved. Recovering addicts cursed with money blow it all in a frenzy of snorting and drunkenness. And boredom weighs heavily on people who have nothing to do. That's so true. Would you rather be happy or poor, or rich and depressed? I was simultaneously tormented by the fact of the Cold War. It obsessed me. It gave me nightmares. It drove me into the desert, into the long night of human soul. I could not understand how it come to pass that the world's two great factions aimed mutual assured destruction at each other. Was one system just as arbitrary and corrupt as the other? Was it a mere matter of opinion? Were all value structures merely the clothing of power? Was everyone crazy? Just exactly what happened in the 20th century anyway? How was it that so many tens of millions had to die, sacrificed to the new dogmas and ideologies? How was it that we discovered something worse, much worse, than the aristocracy, and corrupt religious beliefs? The communism and fascism sought so rationally to supplant. No one had answered those questions as far as I could tell. Like Descartes, I was plagued with doubt. I searched for one thing, anything I could regard as indisputable. I wanted a rock upon which to build my house. It was doubt that led me to it. I once read a particularly insidious practice at Auschwitz. A guard would force an inmate to carry a 100-pound sack of wet salt from one side of the large compound to the other, and then carry it back. I'll beat much flies, said the sign over the camp entrance. Work will set you free, and the freedom was death. Carrying the salt was an act of pointless torment. It was a piece of malevolent art. It allowed me to realize with certainty that some actions are wrong. Alexander Solzhenitsyn wrote definitively and profoundly about the horrors of the 20th century. The tens of millions who were stripped of employment, family, identity, and life. In his Gulag Archipelago, in the second part of the second volume, he discussed the Nuremberg trials, which he considered the most significant event of the 20th century. The conclusion of those trials: there are some actions that are so intrinsically terrible that they run counter to the proper nature of the human being. This is true essentially cross-culturally across time and place. These are evil actions. No excuses are available for engaging in them. To dehumanize a human being, to reduce him or her to the status of a parasite, to torture and to slaughter with no consideration of individual innocence or guilt, to make an art form of pain, that is wrong. What can I not doubt? The reality of suffering? It brooks no arguments. Nihilists cannot undermine it with skepticism. Totalitarians cannot banish it. Cynics cannot escape from its reality. Suffering is real, and the artful infliction of suffering on another for its own sake is wrong. That became the cornerstone of my belief, searching through the lowest reaches of human thought and action, understanding my own capacity to act like a Nazi prison guard, or a Gulag Archipelago trustee, or a torturer of children in a dungeon. I grasped what it meant to take the sins of the world onto oneself. Each human being has an immense capacity for evil. Each human being understands a priori, perhaps not what is good, but certainly what is not. And if there is something that is not good, then there is something that is good. If the worst sin is the torment of others merely for the sake of suffering produced, then the good is whatever is diametrically opposed to that. The good is whatever stops such things from happening. Once again, I'm reminded of the quote, "Bad things happen when good men do nothing." So take action. That was from rule number 7 for Jordan Peterson's book, 12 Rules for Life. My name is Gregory Brandt. I am too a writer as well. I wrote a book called Gonzo Education. Feel free to check it out. I made a video of me reading that book as well. I appreciate you watching. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and have a nice day.